Yesterday I was going out to grab some dinner with my daughter and my son-in-law, and my phone just died. And I couldn't figure out what it was. Needless to say, I kept trying to plug it in, and it just wouldn't work. And it just wouldn't charge up. And I was just really concerned. And then I started looking down inside the place where it charges. And I noticed I put my phone in my pocket, and I get all this lint and stuff that's in the pocket. And then when I plugged it in, I plugged that lint back into it. So I got out a little pin, and I started cleaning that out, and it still wouldn't go. And then, it's amazing that through prayer, it's actually working now. But the amazing thing is a lot of times there's a lot of little lint that's stuck in our lives. Little things that, may not be that important, but have an impact on what we should be doing and the things like that. If we can get that, whatever it is you need to get it out. In my case, it was just a stick pin, just to go in and get that lint out. All of a sudden, we can connect better. We can connect better to our Father in heaven, and we can have the promptings of the Spirit better. So I encourage us to get the lint out in our lives so we can listen, so we can get the power back in our lives that we need. Okay, today we're talking about teaching our children. Teaching our children finance, and also saving for our kids' missions and educations. And I'm going to start with 3 stories. The first is, you guys know that I have a great love for dogs. And again, we've told the story how my wife decided after all the kids, we had kids now, and she could finally get a dog. And I did not like the idea. I said, you know what? And trying to work things out with our wife, it's hard when one person just says, I don't want it at all, and the other person says, but I really like it. And so how do you compromise?
You rent a puppy.
Pardon me?
You rent a puppy.
You rent a puppy. You take your kids over to your neighbor's house. So I said, okay, as long as I don't have to touch the dog, I don't have to feed it, as long as the kids will pay their portion of the dog, and they'll clean up after it and all this other stuff. I think a dog is probably one of the worst things as far as for a house, because you got all the dog poop and all this other stuff. But needless to say about 4 hours later, I walked into the house. I guess it was about 6 hours. And all of a sudden, I saw my youngest, and she was kind of running down there. And I thought, oh no, something's up. And we were the proud owners of a dog. And the kids had all agreed. They'd all put in $60 each. And we got a miniature schnauzer. And I even took the dog out before I came today. That's how, that it is. But, and the question is, are we teaching our kids finance? And what are we teaching them? And so generally my kids are pretty good at, taking care of the dog, and I don't have to work with them too much. But then after a while, my wife decided, let's breed the dog. And so we got some puppies. And so we did the stud dog, they got the pick of the litter, and then we had 4 more puppies. And so, we did all the things, got all the shots and things like this, and we sold the puppies. The last thing I want is more than 1 dog. And, we made between $400 and $600 a piece for the puppies, which was nice. And then one day my daughter came up to me and she goes, Dad, did we pay for the dog? You always wonder if you're teaching your kids well about personal finance. And I said, yeah, you guys paid for it. Each of you put $60 in. Just thought for a minute. Dad, did the dog have puppies? And all of a sudden I knew where this was going. I go, yeah. She goes, Dad, how much did we get for those puppies? And I told her the amount. She thought for a minute and she says, Dad, shouldn't we get a dividend from those puppies? And the point was, we teach through lots of other things. And my kids thought, since they paid for the puppies, since they take care of the puppies. So what we did is we subtracted all the costs of the food and the cost of the medical things and the cost of the shots, and my kids got a dividend that year. And the interesting thing is we bred the dog twice other times, and the third time, Jim Ingebretsen's dog. Jim Ingebretsen, who's a professor here as well, his dog, bred with our dog. And so we had what we call designer puppies, which you only get paid about half of that for. But the point is we teach our kids. We teach our kids by the things that we're doing. And the challenge is how do we teach them? Let me just share an email. Hi, Brother Sudweeks. I was in your class fall blank. I learned so much from your class, and I still use my budget and Quick until this day. My question is mainly for counsel. I have a brother-in-law who is severely in debt. He has a decent job as a manager at a Walmart. He has 3 kids, all under 4, and a stay-at-home wife. He has always spent excessively, and unfortunately, he was mostly bailed out by his parents. Once he was left to fend for himself, he continued to spend frivolously. He now has lots of creditors calling at his door. His checks are being garnished and is being threatened with eviction from his rental place. With all these stresses, his marriage is suffering, and I'm extremely worried for my little nephews. How can I point him in the right direction? I don't think that he will actually listen to me, and I don't know I want to be too involved. Would a professional financial planner be wise? I guess my real question is, how can I best teach him the principles of prudent living and financial management without being the teacher myself? Anyone know of situations where the parents tend to bail out the kids and the kids continue to need bailing out? My wife and I were in New York with our son Clinton on his senior trip. The Sunday before, I had spoken at a ward on personal finance. Did I tell you this story? And we were just getting ready to go on the boat to take us out to Ellis Island, and I got a phone call. And I never talked to this person before, and he says, you know what, I heard you gave a really good talk on Sunday at my daughter's ward. And I could automatically tell where this was going. The fact that it was my daughter's ward. And even before he says, I said, can I make a comment? And he said, sure. I says, I can tell already that the biggest problem your daughter has is not her finances. It's likely her father. And he goes, how did you know I wanted to talk about my daughter? I said, who else would make this phone call? I said, have you consistently been saving your daughter from her financial mistakes? He goes, yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how to help her. I says, maybe one of the biggest things would be just to not leave her alone and let her suffer the consequences. And it was a short conversation, and I'm not sure he liked that conversation. But toward the end, he says, you know what, you're right. Sometimes in our desire to help, we do exactly the wrong things. I told you the story of my daughter who got the ticket driving 100 miles per hour coming up from St. George. And instead of getting mad and things, my wife and I have a goal that we're trying to teach by natural consequences. And guess what? She doesn't have a license now for a certain period of time. And it's probably the best thing. Guess what? When she calls us up and says, Dad, can you take me to this place? I go, oh, I'm sorry. I'm really busy right now. Why don't you call your mom? And she calls her mom, and her mom says, I'm sorry, we're really busy too. You probably need to walk. You might take a bike too. But oftentimes we have challenges here. Let's start kind of like we did yesterday. What are some of the problems with teaching financial responsibility? Why don't we get into our groups? And let's just take a couple of minutes. What are the problems with teaching financial responsibility? Go into our groups and let's spend a couple of minutes. So what did you come up? What are some of the challenges? Hillary, what did you come up with? What did you guys think about?
I kind of was talking about how sometimes a lot of people don't want to hear what they're doing is wrong. And so that makes it really hard to approach people and to be able to tell them or give them advice. I know like with my parents, they have a plan, they've always done it the same way. And so when I try to talk to them about different things that I learn in class, sometimes it's harder for them to really listen and understand.
Good.
You talked about something interesting. Usually when you're teaching financial responsibility, you're teaching them to, like, they're living in a certain standard. And usually you're not saying, oh, go and spend more money and buy more fancy things. You're saying, like, you have to cut back a little bit. It's hard to budget. And it's almost like your quality of life decreases a little bit for, like, long-term benefits. And it's hard to have that vision. And I don't know.
Is it hard to take a long-term view? Other ones? Yeah.
It's really time consuming too. I mean, if you want to teach them principles, a lot of the times the best way is to show them how. Like I have a sibling who was financially experiencing hard times, and they were just going out to find the best place to live, and they rented an expensive apartment, but my parents helped them by doing a lot of market research and found a much cheaper alternative. And I mean, it took a lot of time on their half, but it helped.
Can you help someone out without spending the time? Or is it very, when we help other people, it does take time. It does take sacrifice on our part. I'm working with someone now, and we're going on a couple of years. Scott, how about you?
I guess it's not as fun to save your money and stuff instead of just going to buy, I don't know, whatever toys whatever we want to have. Some people would rather buy stuff now than, oh, in 20 years I could buy a bigger house.
Not as fun. Not as fun in the short term, but it's certainly a lot more fun in the long term.
When teaching your children financial responsibility, I think you have to make sure both the husband and wife are in agreement on everything. Because if one is saying, okay, well, you have to learn from natural consequences, and the other one saying, we're going to bail you out, that would be really hard.
Have to be in agreement. I think one of the challenges that our generation had is the parents didn't know, too. And we as children, we listen carefully so much to what our parents do. Sometimes we don't hear what they say. One other one.
Awesome. Especially in regards to like teaching like kids and things like that, is kind of gauging both interest and kind of ability to understand in terms of age of the children.
Yeah.
That was kind of discussed in the chapter, but I think that's kind of a hard thing to know, like what to teach at what age.
Yeah, what to teach at what age. And those are challenges too. This is from Motley Fool again, really high-class place. 10 things to teach your children about money. Talking with your kids about money is tough. We've known parents who would rather explain to their 4-year-olds why Bambi's mama isn't coming back than to reveal how much money they make. And we think that's a shame. You may not owe your kids a car when they turn 16. You may not owe them a college education. You may not even owe them an allowance, but you do owe them an education and money. So get started with your curriculum. Here's the 10 things before they start out on their own. Number 1, debt sucks. Yeah, adults know that word too. You may not normally use such blunt language. That's okay. The shock will give your words maximum impact. Credit card companies are in a business to make money, not to help people out. Says, after all, they send you convenience checks and give you perks like airline miles. The true mission is to keep you in debt until you die. That said, credit cards can be wonderful if you don't let them trick you into spending more than you have. 2, pay yourself first. That doesn't mean buying a DVD player with your first paycheck. It means putting your money away for emergencies and goals. Savings account can keep you out of debt when you hit those inevitable potholes in the road of life. Debt enslaves you, but savings makes you free. 3, it's the little things that get you. You could drop $4 a day on a Frappuccino at Starbucks or a silver hoop nose ring every day, or not. Investing $4 a day in the stock market could earn you more than $250,000 in 30 years. 4, invest in a market index. Savings accounts are great for emergencies and short-term goals, but to reach your long-term goals, you need the power of the stock market. Within index investing, it's simple to get market-matching returns that over time will make you rich. Best part is you can refer to yourself as a stockholder at your friends' birthday parties. 5, start a Roth IRA as soon as you start earning money. Think of it as saving for financial independence instead of retirement. Whatever you call it, savings early beats savings late every time. 6, take a deep breath. Let me show you the family budget. Here's how much money we take. Looks like a fortune, right? Okay, now here's where it goes. See how much goes for taxes right off the top? Now we subtract for savings, this much for the mortgage, this for the car, this for your college account, this for food, and hey, this for, hey, wake up. I have to admit, I haven't sat down with my kids on that. We have sat down with them to work on their budgets, but I haven't showed them the family budget. 7, budget isn't a bad word. You need a budget too. Track your income, allowance, cash, gifts, babysitting, lawn mowing money, and your expenses. Then you can figure out how long it'll take to save up for those rollerblades or rocket boots you want. Budgeting doesn't have to be hard. It's as simple as ABC. A, pay yourself. B, pay your bills. C, spend no more than what's left. Number 8, keeping up with the Joneses or P. Diddy's is a sucker's game. Read The Millionaire Next Door. The Joneses could be head over heels in debt and sick at heart over it. P. Diddy's new BMW convertible is probably leased. Don't let the glitter fool you. 9, don't trust anyone. When it comes to your money, you can't abdicate responsibility. Many financial advisors have conflicts of interest. Their advice is designed to maximize their commissions, not your money. Others are simply incompetent. No one cares as much about your money as you do, except your parents, who only want the best for you, of course. And number 10, money can't buy happiness or love, but it can help you avoid many kinds of misery. You'll have to find your own happiness, but it's easier when economic hardship isn't dominating your life. So don't even try to buy happiness. Instead, buy security for yourself and your loved ones, and then find happiness in them. Kind of an interesting point. So we've got our problems. Like we did yesterday. What are the principles of teaching our children to be financially reliant? And the more important, how do we apply that? And how did your parents teach you? Let's spend a couple of minutes. Again, think through the principles. What are the critical things? Okay, let's take a couple of minutes and just talk in our groups.
So what are the principles we've already talked about the challenges. So why?
Let's kind of have each group come up with two principles. Two principles. So example, one principle might be teach by example. So let's come up with two principles for each group. Sorry, give you one more minute, sorry. Or do we have the principles? Go ahead. Cassie, what principles did you guys come up with?
Oh, that was one that we talked about. We just wrote down. But we also talked about just like the communication that parents have with kids, just communicating with them why maybe they can't buy something or why it's not in the budget, or also making them sometimes help pay for something so they understand the hard work that goes in to earn that money.
Anyone have parents who said we'll pay half for something? Okay. Phoebe, so what did you get with when your parents paid half?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking back to when I was working and stuff, so still, if it wasn't a necessity, like if we're out shopping and clothes and there's something else I wanted, my mom was like,
When I was a kid growing up, I wanted a mini trail, a Honda mini trail. That's how old I am, I don't know. And my parents said, okay, if you'll pay half for it, we'll do it. And so we actually bought it first and then I paid half over it. I did the same thing with a trumpet. I had a Constellation trumpet that I paid half for. And even now, with our kids, we'll do the same thing. But the interesting thing is, what lesson did that teach? I wanted something and they went out and bought it for me and then I paid them back over the next 2 or 3 years. And I thought about that in my case, and it says that was teaching me to go into debt to a degree. And so now when our kids want things, we says, okay, we'll pay half, but you earn your half first. So my son got a very nice keyboard, an electric keyboard. Very expensive one too, but he paid half on it. Our kids, when there's things that we want, when our kids were younger, when they wanted bicycles and things like that. But those are good things. Other principles.
We're stewards over what we've been given.
Okay. So, understand, Stuart, what's the application? Howard?
Is that we need to understand that God's given us everything and that we're responsible for how we use His resources.
Anyone have parents? You know, you lose something or you break something, the parents go out and just buy it for you? What happens if kids don't put things away and they get thrown away and parents rebuy it? What lessons do the kids learn? So our kids, they don't put things up, they go in a box in the garage, and after a while, a box in the garage, we take it to DI. And guess what? Mom and Dad don't help them buy new clothes unless they take care of them.
My in-laws are teaching my little sister-in-law a good lesson right now. We were at her house and she broke my ukulele by sitting on it. And so she has to pay me back for that ukulele, and her parents were like, don't worry about that. And then they decided that they were going to make her earn some of the money to pay back the ukulele since she was going to broke it. So today, in Cedar Hill, she's having a bake sale if anybody wants to go. But I just thought that, I was thinking about that, and I thought that was a really good lesson. Like, we're not just going to cover you, like, they want her to at least, I mean, the amount she contributes is probably going to be like $25. But at least they're helping her see, like, take responsibility and things like that.
I got a question. How about kids with retainers or glasses or things like this? I had my son who lost his retainer. Oh, that's too bad. What happens when Mom and Dad go by and replace the retainer? Will they likely lose it again? He had to pay $200 for that retainer. And you know what? He's never lost a retainer since. And you know what? The lesson from the first child, or the one child, was sufficient, and none of my other kids have lost their retainers yet either. What are we teaching? Nicole.
Oh, I was just gonna say that happened with me and my contacts. And I ripped one, and my mom's like, "Okay, you rip another one, you have to pay for it." I never ripped another one.
Never ripped another one. So isn't it interesting, the lessons? Other principles. How about over in this group here? Scott, what principles did you guys come up with? And then we'll go.
Well, lots of stuff's already been talked about. Basically,
Okay.
like, we talked about how having to work for things, like to earn it, and also we talked about just letting them know they don't always get everything they want.
Yeah.
I like the thing on your slides that said, like, if you give them everything they want, then they're going to want.
They're going to want for the rest of their lives.
Because I think that's one of the biggest things that kids do. If they want something, they either sometimes don't get it, or maybe they have to wait till Christmas or maybe or something.
How about the statement says we can't afford it? Or maybe in the position is we can afford it, but we don't choose to spend our money in that way. My kids, Dad, we can afford it. He says, I know we can afford it. But that's not how we choose to spend our resources.
I think
Jared.
parents are afraid of saying that. If they say we can't afford that or you can't have that, it's like saying we don't love you.
Yeah. You know, and is money associated with love? You know, some people are so sad about the things they didn't receive as a child that they forget about the things that they did. And a lot of times money is not an excuse for love. People use money as a lack of love. We don't spend the time, and so we want to buy things for our kids because, you know, we're not spending the time there. And as we told you before, one of my goals that my wife and I have is we want to give our children everything that money cannot buy. And part of that is our time. We do a thing on Monday nights. We have family home evening on Sunday nights, and on Mondays we try to go off one-on-one with the kids. And we'll go, we got a small budget, and we'll go bowling or miniature golf or just something, whatever the child wants to do. I've got one daughter, what she likes to do is like to ride the quads. So we'll ride the quads up and down the street. You know, and, but, you know, give them the most important things. Give them your time. I was listening to the article, the conference talk by Elder Uchtdorf. And he says, you know, we talked about people just before they died, what was one of the biggest regrets that they had? And the regret was that they didn't spend more time with the people they loved. Other principles? How about teaching? Celeste.
So I think being consistent too, like on how you don't change it every day, or they'll never learn.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
Chelsea, sorry. So be consistent. I say the name and then I go, that's wrong. Kia.
I think priority is important.
Priorities. Any more applications on how your parents taught you?
Well, just another principle. I think the principle of saving, being responsible for your saving, you can do it differently. But one thing my parents did when I was growing up that was kind of annoying at the time.
It was kind of annoying at the time.
Yeah. Whenever I earned something, it went toward 10% towards tithing, and half of it they said I needed to save it.
Half of it you said you needed to save.
Yeah, so it was, like I said, it was really annoying at the time because I just wanted to spend it.
Uh-huh.
That taught me the principle to not spend everything.
We do the same thing in our family. And I'm just going to share, we call it our kids' tithing spreadsheet. And we'll just bring it up. And what we do the same thing. You know, you have to pay your tithing 10%. Then you pay yourself 30%. So we weren't quite as bad as your parents. I have to, you know, now when my kids complain, I'll have to say, well, you should have heard Ben's parents. They have to do 50%. I'm sorry. Here's our time with mom and dad one. You can see that this is just an old one we did. But you can see grades. We actually pay our kids for grades. So if you get an A, you get $10. If you get all A's, you get an extra $20 bonus. And if you get straight A's, you get a $20 bonus. But notice there's that retainer minus $200 that our son had. And my kids fight. They don't like this. They don't like, but their freshman year in college, they're so thankful for it because this is the money. And then we actually, what they save, we'll actually do a multiple of that to help them for their education. Our goal is to help our children save for their missions and education, and our goal is to help them so they can come out of their college education debt-free. So we've had two children graduate debt-free. But we figured if they'll work 10 hours a week during the school and 40 to 50 hours a week during the summer, we'll help them out. Phone bill, we charge our kids for the phone bill. You know, kids make babysitting. And then once a year we get, at tithing settlement, we'll write them the check. Comes out of Dad's check, so I deduct it from our, our taxes. But there's another one. I had one daughter who decided she wanted a gym membership. You know, what happens when they commit to these things? You know, and they don't think about it. So these long-term commitments, we just need to be wise. So let me just share just a few principles. I'm not saying these are the only ones or necessarily the right ones. But I will say that these are important. Number one, teach by example individually. You know, what we do is so much more forceful in the eyes of our children than what we say. And then as a couple. You know, I like this. When children come along and reach the age of accountability, they should be involved in money concerns on a limited partnership basis. I like Elder Ashton, he recommended 6 additional points, which was honest tithing. What do we teach our children by paying tithes and offerings? What do we teach them by saying, hey, would you like to donate to fast offerings? And it's funny, with my kids, I actually see the difference. And some say, no, I don't want to donate any of them. So, and I see others who will say, well, how much do I have left in my account? Why don't we take half of that and put it in? And it's just interesting to see that. And I remember going to tithing settlement as a kid with my dad. And my dad sitting down and writing out a very large check. And he said, you know what, the Lord has blessed us a lot. And this wasn't tithing, this was fast offering. And you know, back then it was probably budget and things like that. But I still remember that. And I said, you know, the Lord has blessed us a lot. Early, the importance of working and earning. We told you the story of doing walnuts, picking out walnuts. But it's critical that we learn to work. And you know, some of you have been to my house. We have a big yard, and that's where I teach my kids how to work. Decisions keeping with their capacities to understand. Save your money is hollow. Save for a mission, bicycle, dollhouse, trousseau, car makes an understandable sense. I don't recommend that car one. So, contribute to total family welfare. You know, there are things we do just because we're a family. Projects that we work on just because we're a family. And then part of integrity and honesty. So, the challenge is we all have that. We all have to teach our kids. And if we don't teach them, who will? And so to think about the things that we're doing, not just because that's what you want to do, but because this is how I'll be a good example to my kids, to me gives me even more encouragement to do a better job. And any other final thoughts on teaching kids? What your parents taught you that really helped out?
I have a thought, but I just had a question. Like, how did you and your wife go about choosing? Like you said, your kids, like for their education, you will help them. You want them to work like 10 hours during the week during the school year. How did you guys decide that? Because I found, like, at least with my family, my parents kind of had the attitude, like, we'd rather you not work during school because I paid it off better just getting scholarships, but getting good grades and only focusing on school and working during the summer. Yeah. So how did you decide to think, you know?
Probably pretty arbitrary. You know, my kids are good students, but they didn't, and anything they get in scholarships is $1 less they have to earn. We just figured we didn't want to give them the money without work on their side. And I actually had one daughter who almost didn't make it one semester because she didn't have enough saved. And our principle that we're trying to teach is the child has to work, and then we will help. And it's kind of like the Lord. You know, he'll help after we've done all we can. And so I've had daughters working. You know, Brick Oven has been a good employer of my kids. In fact, they've told my younger kids, hey, as soon as you're old enough, you come here, you work for us. Your older sisters have done a good job. You know, and they've made a nice reputation for the younger ones. But the question is, do you have to help? Do you have to pay for your kids' missions and educations? And the answer is no. But if you decide to do it, you know, set up a plan, work on it, and then share that with your kids. Okay. Cassie.
Looking back now at everything you've taught your kids financially, is there anything that you would change or do differently, knowing what you know now?
Yeah. This little spreadsheet is kind of a nice thing. It's logical. It puts it all in one place. And I had a daughter who went to college. And because before they just give all the money to Dad, and Dad's kind of the banker and put it there. She got through 6 months and she says, Dad, I don't know how to pay tithing. And so we kind of went back and we worked with her on that. And so this is a good thing, but maybe instead of once a year, I'd probably have them, say once a month, sit down with their tithing and take it to the bishop. So it kind of connects the actions with the results. You guys also know, my wife and I, we pay our tithes and offerings with appreciated securities. We actually went back and changed that. Now we'll do our tithing, we'll do a certain amount every month, just so our kids see us, paying our tithe, making those donations. And when the kids come collecting fast offerings, so they see us writing the check and things like that. And we still do majority of it with appreciated securities, but at least it's the habits there that I think are important.
One of your slides talks about how you should help family members understand the family financial situation, but what's your opinion on the kind of transparency there should be between, if your child asks you, how much you make, he's just kind of interested as a teenager,
I always say sufficient for our needs.
Yeah. That's what my dad did too. He said, I make about $6, $7 an hour. He had no idea, what money was.
Yeah.
But so kind of, there's no need to talk about it that much, right? So,
yeah, but we do talk about what we save, and how that's important. I went out to dinner last night with my daughter and her husband, and they're talking. It's fun. We talk about these finance things, and they're talking about the same things. The mortgage market right now is very attractive. There's a lot of work going on, and so he's kind of spending a little bit more of his time. But they're talking about putting it into it. He talked about his company has a Roth 401k as well, and talked about how they're trying to maximize that out as much as possible. The challenge is I think my mistake is I'm probably overly talk about it too much. There's a real pain to having your dad who's a personal finance teacher, but it's fun when the kids will bring things up about, we just found out that the company has a Roth 401k and we're beginning to contribute. I see the things that we've tried to teach are slowly beginning to take hold. And again, probably the most critical things is, are you living on a budget and are you saving? So our kids here, in order for them to get the match, in college, if they'll put up a certain amount, we'll match it. We have to see their budget and how they did. Okay. Other questions? So now my question is, so we have a goal to save for missions and education. First of all, do we have to, is there anything that says you have to help your children pay for their education? No. Is there any place that says you have to let your children pay for their missions? No, but it could be an individual goal. My patriarchal blessing says, set aside a portion of your income to educate your children and send them on missions. I have pretty strong guidance there. So that's the choice that we've made. My wife and I sat down and we've kind of decided what we were going to do. And then we've tried to implement it for our kids. Cassie.
One thing that my parents did is they made all of my brothers earn $10,000 before they left on their mission. And so they were thinking that they were paying for it, but sneakily my parents paid for it while they were gone. So that when they came back, they had $10,000 and then some because it was in CDs and stuff while they were gone for college.
Yeah. My kids do kind of the same thing, and we like the blessings, and so we pay for our kids' missions. How about I appreciate the comments and the ideas, and there's lots of different things. Back to your comments on the mission, I found the Lord blesses those who help missionaries. And so we prefer to have the blessings. But what are the challenges with, what are the challenges for saving for missions and education? Scott?
The challenge is there's both. It's hard enough to save for college alone, but then to save for both at the same time, it's just hard.
Yeah.
finding a balance between the retirement, or rather, the things you as a family are trying to do, and then
Find the balance.
education.
As a parent, is it your responsibility to prepare for your retirement first or your kids' education first? Yeah, your retirement first. That's got to be the biggest thing. I would encourage you as you save, your retirement has the first priority. I'm amazed at the number of people who take from their retirement money to pay for their kids' education, and I say, I don't think that's wise. You know, the kids will live a lot longer than the parents will. Other challenges.
It's hard to know exactly how much you should save for college. I mean, what if your kid doesn't get into BYU, or what if they can't go to a place where tuition is so low? It's how far is a certain amount of money going to go?
Does the cost of the education have an impact on where your kids go? I had this discussion with one of my daughters. She wanted to go to the Seattle Art Institute. So we sat down and we talked, okay, what's tuition? She said, okay, this is what it is. How much are books? Figured out that. What's your room and board? Figured out that. And then the key question was, once you get out, what's the cost of the education? Or how much will you be making a year? So she went through all this analysis, and it came out it was $170-something thousand. She'd make $35,000 a year. And I says, okay, let's go to BYU. Okay, what happens if you got here? What will it cost? So we went through that same analysis, and it was about $45,000. Not a year, but that was for all 4 years. I said, what's your salary when you go out? And she said, oh, about $65,000. We talked with some of the professors. And then the clincher was, okay, here's how much mom and dad have saved to help you. So anything beyond this amount, you will be paying. And it was nowhere near that $170,000. And so she made the decision to come to BYU because it's a lot cheaper. Better school as well. But those, you know, when our kids have to study it out in our minds and think through all of these things, it's so important. How important is education? I'm speaking to the choir because you guys are here. Anyone seen this chart? If you have a high school education, what is your expected lifetime earnings? Let's do that first. Not a high school graduate, annual earnings. This is from last year. So basically $1 million over your lifetime. What happens if you graduate from high school? How much does that kick that up? Yeah. High school diploma, it's good for about 1.3 million. How about an associate's degree? Or no degree, 1.5. Associates, 1.7. How about a bachelor's? Yeah. So now we're about 2.3. Masters, 2.6. Doctors. So is there a relationship between education and earning power? And I think the fact that we're all here, I think, says that we agree with that. And what have our leaders said about education? What have the prophets said? Yeah, get as much education as you can. Education can prove to be the wisest and most profitable investment you'll ever make. Isn't it interesting? Education is the key that unlocks the door of opportunity. You know, coming here to BYU, isn't it enter to learn, go forth to make money? Why do you think the church has Brigham Young University and BYU Idaho and BYU Hawaii? Is it so you'll go out and pay a lot of tithing? What's the relationship between education and the church? Yeah, so generally the higher the education, the greater our ability to serve. So what are the problems of not preparing our children for missions and educations? Sure.
I want to ask a quick question really fast.
Okay.
So how do you feel about, I don't know, let's say your wife wants to go and get her doctorate's degree or something like that. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Is that?
I would love her to get, my wife's got her bachelor's degree, and she was doing some master's work. And right now, I kid her, I keep telling her, you got to go back and do a law degree. I said, you'd be very good at it. She's very methodical. She's very clear on her thinking. She's very good. I would encourage her. And I think the more education you get, the better you are. I love the fact that our goal is to have all of our kids have their degrees. And realize I came from a family, when I was going to school, no one had graduated from college. Luckily, now a lot of my brothers have. So it's important. I strongly encourage spouses to get the education you can. And I was pleased when my one daughter, she had a child, and I have to admit, I watched the baby while she was attending some of her class up in my office. That was really a lot of fun. In fact, so I strongly encourage that. And education is not just for the husband. And really, is education an end goal, or does education teach us how to learn? And I think education teaches us how to learn. So what should be our principles for preparing for missions and education? Here's a question. Do you think students get more out of it if they pay for their own education or if their parents pay for it? Nicole, what do you think?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Pay for it.
Of course, what do you think research has found? If parents pay for it, do they graduate sooner or later?
Later.
Yeah, if parents pay for it, they generally graduate sooner, but the question is what do you get out of it? And so it's a combination. It's not a cut and dried thing. It's not you have to do this or you don't have to do this. It is an individual goal that you and your spouse will set. And again, my wife and I chose that we will try to help our kids. But our framework is that we will try to help them by they work and they save a certain amount, and then we'll match it with a multiple of that amount. And if someone comes and talks to me, we can kind of share some of those things. So how did your parents help you guys prepare for your missions and educations? My wife didn't serve a mission because she felt her parents couldn't afford it. And so we made that decision that we would make sure the resources were available so our children would never have to make that decision. But her parents, on her education, they helped her out at $10 a week. That's all they could afford. So what are the principles? Thomas.
I think helping financially is a big goal, a big thing to do, but I think before you do that, I think you have to help teach them it's important.
Yeah.
So I think it's helping your kids do their algebra and their English, and helping them learn to do their homework and do the best they can.
Yeah. We have a thing in our house. My kids have a contract for driving. And the contract is you have to have a 3.7 just to be able to drive. You have to have a 3.7 to date. You have to have a 3.7 to play sports. Are we painful parents? I'm sure we are. But my kids realize that is important to them. So I had one semester where a daughter came into high school and she loved sports and she was very good at it. She actually played college sports. But she was playing basketball and she was playing soccer. Say, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. How you doing? Oh, we're doing great. How you doing? I'm doing great. Went to the parent-teacher conferences and she had a 2.7. So we sat down with her and said, you know the rules. Unless we have this certain GPA, you don't play sports. Tell me what you're going to do. So notice that we didn't tell her what she had to do. She told us what she was going to do. And so after 2 or 3 days, she came back and she says, okay, I'm going to not play basketball. I really do want to continue with soccer, but I will bring my grades up. So we loosened it up a little bit so she got to continue to play soccer. But by the end of that year, she had a 3.699 or something like that. And even now we have our Korean, we have a Korean foreign exchange student who has, say, grades have not been a priority. And we've said, okay, for you, you need to do at least a 3.5 to be able to do the things that you went to do these things for talent shows and things like that. And in our family, we have those high grades. And the amazing thing is she rose to the occasion. And she came and she started talking to us and she says, this is so exciting. I never knew I could get good grades before. And she says, why? She says, well, I was more concerned about playing with my friends than I were about the grades. And so what do we expect? And it will differ in families and different, and that GPA is the one that we use, and different families will be different. But I think we need to try to understand our children and seek Heavenly Father's help to understand them. And what are the things that we can do to motivate them to accomplish the goals that we think they should have? How do you... Oh, sorry.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
So, in your experience, did you find that with your different kids, you were able to be consistent across the board? Or I just think with different personalities and things like that,
We have family standards. And so the kids know. We actually have a contract for driving and a contract for dating. When kids move into we have an apartment in our basement, we have a contract for living in the basement. And if you can articulate the things that are needed, it works a lot better. We've had 3 or 4 foreign exchange students, and we've actually had, one that just didn't follow, wasn't doing the things that we said, and so we actually came up and put a contract here that says, okay, this is what we expect. And if you're not willing to follow this, we will send you back. You can't do that with your kids. But the point is what are we trying to do? Isn't that what the Lord does with us? He lets us know what the expectations are. And so if we look at Heavenly Father as kind of the ultimate example of a good father, and trying to follow the frameworks there. So how do we save? Is there a priority money for education and missions? Let's talk about how do we do this. Just like there was a priority money for savings and investments, I think it's the same way here. So our first priority is free money, scholarships and grants. I think that's important. Again, there's a number of different grants that are available. I wasn't a very good student. I still made it, but I wasn't a very good student, so I didn't have much on the scholarship side. But help our kids to see that. Family money, personal savings, encourage them to save. Again, my kids fight tooth and nail. Why do I have to do that? You guys are so mean. 40% of my stuff goes right off the top. We hear all of these stories. But do as much as you can help, but don't do it all. 3 is employment. And this is some advice. I work with BYU Financial Aid to put these slides together. You should not work more than 20 hours a week. And high school students, I'm not sure I like high school. I've got a daughter who works, but she doesn't put that many hours in. But be careful on the work. Loans, use all of your loans wisely. And realize the differences are who pays the interest, when you got to start paying back, who takes out the loan, what's the interest rate cap, and what are the costs. So let's start with let's start talking about what are some of the vehicles to save for your children's education. Let's kind of go through a few of these. 529 plans. That's a good one. In fact, my son-in-law was commenting yesterday over dinner. He said, you know what? We put $1,000 away last year for Logan's education. And I went through my head and I said, oh, $1,000 times 5%. So he just had he got $50 in free money because if you use BYU's plan and you live in Utah, you can take 5% of the amount up to $3,860, and you take that as a reduction on your taxes. And so He put in $1,000 and then he got a $50 tax credit for that. Other things you could use. What have we talked about? Some of our cash management alternatives. That if you use the proceeds for education, they're both state tax-free and federal tax-free. Remember your I-bonds? So here's with tax benefits, without tax benefits. And so we talked about these. 1.76 double E bonds are 0.2%. And the nice things are these savings bonds, are they federal or state tax-free? They're state tax-free. And again, remember, if you use them for qualified expenses, which is really just tuition, they're federal tax-free as well. And is 1.76, are these, the rate changes every 6 months? But still, 1.76% is really not bad. And then if you make more than $142,000, you don't get the tax benefits. There's two different, okay, how about Coverdell education? Education savings account. And what this is just like a Roth. So you put it in like a Roth. You pay taxes on it now. When you take it out, as long as you use for qualified educational expenses, you don't have to pay. It's federal and state tax-free. So it's kind of a nice thing here. And again, what my wife and I do is, again, we put money in these accounts. And then once our kids earn money, and you know, when tuition bills comes up, they pay their multiple, and then we write them a check for our multiple too. And then we just write it out of this account. And then at the end of the year, they get their 1098-T form. And then we just make sure that we haven't taken out more than that, whatever that 1098-T. Josh?
So what happens when all your kids are graduating from college and you still have excess funds in that account?
Okay, I can change it to my grandkids. So we've already, funds must be used by 8:30. And so we've transferred it from one child to the next. And I'm finding different majors have different things. I had a daughter who graduated in exercise science. And that's a pretty reasonable major. I have another daughter who's in Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Photography. You know, her camera is like 6,000 or something like some huge amount. So different majors are more expensive. So, and then I have another daughter who graduated in communication, wasn't too expensive. So just realize that's the case. Again, make more than 220, you can't use this. And then there's the 529 plans, there's really two types. One is the prepaid tuition, and the other one's the savings plan. The prepaid tuition basically says you can go in and you can make a payment now to the college of your choice, and then when the child comes in a certain number of years, their tuition will be paid. What's the risk on that? Yeah, they don't get in. So this is really not as, and they're not offered at all schools. This is really not as attractive as the savings plan. This is the one I like. You know, I put it in my child's name, but I still have control over the assets. In Utah's case, what I do is I have 13 options. And I chose option 3, which is that it's like 70% equities and 30% bonds until the child turns 16. And at 16, it goes 60-40. And at 17, it goes 50-50. And at 18, it goes, you know, 40-60. So they actually make that allocation for me. So you can choose. Utah's plan is wonderful. It's all Vanguard funds. So I like that. You guys know I like Vanguard. The other thing about it is if I buy a fund, you know, a Vanguard fund, an investor share, I'll pay about 17 basis points. Utah's 529 plans, I think I pay like 3 basis points for the same fund. So it's a lot cheaper too. Nice things, tax deductions. Again, in Utah's plan, you can deduct up 5% of your amount on your, as a tax credit against your Utah taxes. And I think it's up to $1,860 per person or $36.80 for a couple. As a minimum, look at this. Is there a minimum contribution? You can give $14,000 per year, or you can give up to $70,000 because they assume it's over 5 years. So, and the nice thing here about Utah's plan is you can have up to $397,000 in the plan. So it's a huge amount that you can use. And so what you want to do is, whatever state you live in, you need to check. But what are the fees at the plan and the fund level? What are the tax benefits? Again, Utah has that 5% tax plan. What are their investments and options? Skylar.
What about moving? So say you get a plan in Utah and
Okay.
the States, does that just kind of roll over, or do you?
You can actually keep it here in Utah if you want. So it really doesn't matter where you live. You just don't get the tax benefit. And my guess is you can probably roll those over to another place. Cassie.
When did you start this? Like when your children were born, or?
They didn't have these when my kids were born. So we started these later. We started these about 10 years ago when we came here to BYU.
What would you suggest?
When the kids are born.
Okay, and then an account for each kid?
Yeah, and that's what you have to do. You have to do an account for each kid. And then on Quicken, I have, education savings account, Kimberly. Education, Kylie. And then I have my mission account. So I've got mission and wedding accounts. I've got education accounts. And then I have 529 accounts, and I've got education IRA accounts. And so, and they're separate. So I know this is Emily's wedding, mission and weddings account. I know this is Kylie's 529 plan account. And so I don't shift things around. Once I put it under the child's name, I know I won't touch it.
So, question?
Yes, sorry.
So actually, if the money is still in one account because one of your children didn't spend it much,
right?
Can you bring it to another child?
Right.
The 529 is like a Roth as well.
Yeah, it's exactly like a Roth. Now, realize with the savings bonds, the only thing you can really spend it for is tuition. And if you do it for tuition, it's tax-free federal and state. When I get to the education IRA, it's a lot broader. When you get to the 529s, we bought computers and cameras and things like that with that as well. So it's quite broad in what we do. So tuition fees, room and board at qualified expenses. And notice for your Coverdale, it could be high school expenses as well. Secondary, elementary, and post-secondary schools. So things to be aware there too. So those are kind of the ones I like the most. I like the 529 plans. I like the education IRAs. How about when you don't have tax advantages? Are there any advantages of saving for a mission? Are tax advantages to help you pay for your mission? Tax ways to save? Is the government giving us tax benefits to save for a mission?
Oh, sorry. I just had a question about the 529 plan.
Okay.
If it's like a Utah 529 plan, can you only use those tuitions for
no, you can use it in any state.
Utah? Any state?
Yep. Any institution of qualified higher education. So the nice thing about those plans is, again, they're really flexible. Yeah, but how do you, so there are no tax benefits as you're saving for a mission. You can pay for your mission. You can do your donations through appreciated securities. But just like you can do donations to Red Cross or United Way or things like that. So it's just another place. But how do you save for your kids' missions? So I'll tell you the way we did it. And the way we did it was not a very smart way. but we'll teach about. But first of all, you invest tax efficiently. Know your tax rates. We talked about this. Invest wisely, receive tax-exempt income. We've talked about these things. And the nice thing about investing tax efficiently is, if you do it right, it's low cost. You can still get the returns and you can put it away. For most of you saving for missions and educations, I strongly recommend, consistent with your risk level, but I like index funds. Very low cost because I pay low taxes, because they're low cost, and generally I get the market returns. So we encourage you to use those things there. Disadvantages on tax efficient, there's just no tax advantages. Now there's a thing called, these are called custodial accounts. Uniform gift to minors, uniform transfer to minors account. At one time these were beneficial, and what they did is these accounts were taxed at the child's rate. They are no longer taxed at the child's rate. The loopholes have been eliminated. And so I do not recommend these anymore. The reason being is I put money in these accounts for my kids, and then when they turn 18, the assets go back to the kids. Now, how I got around that is I just didn't tell my kids we have this asset for. And so what happens just before they go on their missions, I turn the assets over to them, we put it in a joint account, and then we use that to pay for mission expenses and things like that. But I really don't recommend it, because here's what happens now, and this is what happened last year, is let's say I put in X amount and it doubled to 2X. When this transfers over to the kids, the child has to pay the taxes on the total amount, even though, you know, half of it was money that I put in. So the tax rates, I don't recommend these anymore. But here's what I think the best. You know, when you're saving for your kids' mission and education, just invest tax efficiently. Be wise in what you do. Custodial accounts, again, these are not recommended. And so, kind of in summary, the question of, well, Cassie.
Sorry, quick question. If you had a savings account for your child's mission, and say you have the whole amount up front, would you say there's a benefit to paying monthly over the 2 years, or paying all of it up front, or paying for 2 annual amounts?
You can do whatever you'd like, whatever you'd like. It works out. And what we've done with our kids is, when I get around to it, I just pay for the whole year. You know, because it's easy with appreciated securities. Yeah. And so we just pay it at one time. Phoebe?
In terms of the 529 savings plan, what is, like, when you are withdrawing for, when I guess the first year, do you do yearly, is there a limit on how many times you can withdraw? No. Like, do you do a semester, or?
No, you can do it any way you would like. You're requesting a withdrawal. And generally what we'll do is we'll wait till the end of a semester, figure out what all the costs were, and then we will withdraw the amount for our portion of that. And then that basically pays us back. But it has to be done within the calendar year. So, you know, and it takes about a week to 10 days to get the check.
To open up like a 529 plan, is it the same as like an IRA or whatever?
Exactly the same. You just go online to uesp.org and just follow the instructions there. So all you need is your Social Security, email, bank routing number, and you can either write a check or they can pull it out of a bank as well. So kind of in summary, teaching your kids finance is not an easy thing. And truthfully, our kids will learn more from what we do than what we say. And so it's really important that we are living on a budget. It's really important that we are saving every month. It's important that we are paying our tithes and offerings. The lessons that we want to teach are often different than what we're trying to teach. And so if we're living in such a way as to be good examples to our kids, that's probably the best lesson we can. We talked about sharing some stories. I shared my story of the puppies. We talked about, you know, we talked about saving for mission and shared the story of the walnut acre. You know, picking up the walnuts. And there's a lot of problems with teaching kids financial responsibilities. And the most important problem is, you know, it's like Pogo says, we have seen the enemy and he is us. And so we just need to set goals that we can do better. We talked about recommendations on how to teach it. And examples, we gave examples of things that you could be doing. We talked about saving for your kids' missions and educations. And there's not a requirement that we pay for our kids' educations and missions. If you decide to do it, that's great. But you should not put your retirement at risk to pay for your kids' missions and educations. And you also shouldn't I encourage you not to go into debt for your kids' missions and education. Now, if you want to help, that's fine. But we encourage you to develop a plan. What is your plan for your kids' missions? Talk with your spouse. What do you want to do? We talked about the retirement money. Your first priority is free money. You know, get it's grants and loans and encourage your kids to do well so they can get scholarships. Talked about parents' money. You know, helping them work. Talked about, you know, having work during school. Don't work too many hours because you'll make more money after you graduate than you will before. But it's not a bad thing if people are working 10 hours a week to kind of help to accomplish your goals. We talked about, you know, helping your kids to figure out what they need to do for education. I used the story of the Seattle Art Institute with my daughter there. And then we talked to different types of vehicles, you know, those little savings bonds. You know, 1.76 isn't bad, especially when you're getting, what, 25.25% in your savings accounts and things like this. We talked about education IRAs where you can put $2,000 a year in, again, just like a Roth IRA. We talked about 529 plans. The bottom line is we need to teach our kids. You know, we need to teach our kids about how to be financially secure. You know, and if we can teach our kids, look at the advantage. We're not only teaching our kids, but we're teaching our grandkids as well. And probably the most important thing is teach by example individually, teach by example as a couple. Follow those things Elder Ashton, you know, pay an honest tithe. And teach your kids that they don't get everything they want. Teach your children to contribute to family welfare. All of these things are important. Okay, questions? Thanks, everyone.